So this episode is called Up to Mischief because later on I'm going to be using Mischief, which is an infinite canvas drawing program. But for now I'm using My Paint, which is an infinite canvas drawing program also. And again, I'm still struggling with figures and my style and stuff. I had some people comment about, like, you don't need to be doing this, or your style looks fine or something. Maybe it was just a case of they weren't seeing where I was heading. And then I realized, like, yeah, it's got to be confusing if you hear me and I look at this and I'm like, this isn't working. And there's no explanation of why, like, what's not really working about it. Why am I saying that? And so what I decided to do was just, so this is, I did this in August 8th, 2014. And I thought I'd just redo it now because my style is much more developed now. And maybe the difference will let you know why I'm saying this isn't working, for instance. So this is if I was to redo it now. And you can see how in this one, okay, the face is kind of pointy, but the body's still round. The shapes aren't really consistent. And the proportions are sort of realistic in the body. Not entirely, but kind of. And then the face is very stylized. The hair is extremely stylized. So again, you have this inconsistency. Whereas here, everything is pointy, and some things are ridiculous, and some of the proportions have been really messed up, or played with, rather. But at least it's consistent. At least it's one thing. So, like here, with the hair, it's much stronger in terms of... I mean, I feel if I was to critique this now, like, yeah, it's still lacking a flow, and I'm working on that. But it's much more one thing. And you may dislike this. Like, your personal taste may be that you prefer things rounder. And I can understand that, because even for me, there are times where I prefer things to be a little more soft and round, but the thing is, when you're developing a style, you have to consider that the style is more important than just your whims. Things need to be cohesive, and so that's very important. So it's not just about, well, I like this, so I do this, and things have repercussions. So when you squish one thing, it has an effect on everything else. And with this one, I had to make it more side view because I don't think the head is going to turn that far. It looks pretty broken. And yeah, I really wasn't that good with hair. Not that I'm good with hair now. Just, yeah, it's a little more comfortable. But I'm working on this. So this is also a work in progress. But okay, back to what I was doing at that time. So I was still struggling, and now you can see look how round these are, right? These forms, and it's not sharp enough. And this guy's kind of cool. I do like some things. Like, I like this thing. It's an interesting design. He has a flatter chin. Because I was still experimenting. Like, okay, yeah, I like pointy chins, but does it work for everything? What if I go a bit more rounded? And again, you may like more round forms or more square forms, and that's just personal taste. But the thing is, you can't use that as a reason to change things. Like, it doesn't work if you say have a 90% square style and you on a whim make some things in a completely different shape language. And it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine when I see styles that do have this quality where it's like a bit of a mismatch. But anyway, this head looks really broken. And just some drawings of my character Xeon, and this again, struggling, feeling like the proportions aren't there yet, and this is probably a demonstration of how frustrated I was, just feeling like, what am I doing, where am I going, And some people have mentioned, like, why don't you look at so-and-so, an artist, because they're doing this well. And I have gone through this period where I did try that, but it never works for me. And I think it's because the way I am, I need to understand not just what someone's doing, but why they're doing that. And I found that it's a little bit like, let's say you're doing a math problem and your textbook has the answers in the back of the book. And if you are doing the problem and you're solving it yourself, you know how you got from the question to the answer. Whereas if you just look in the back of the book and here's the answer that someone else is providing you, you don't understand how to use that as well. So for me, it's really important, it always has been, to go to the source and figure it out myself, even though it takes way longer. And maybe it's kind of a dumb way of going about it. I don't know. But I do prefer this way, and it works for me, whereas the other way of copying, it's just way too easy for my brain to go into copy mode. And even then, I'm seeing someone else's results, but not knowing what their work process was. How did they get from point A to point B? And really, that's what this series is all about. Because you will see people with finished styles, and you don't know how they got there. So hopefully with this, it's demystifying things and also showing you that nothing happens overnight, you know? Like, you have a cool style, okay, but that doesn't mean you just magically got that or you even started off like that. And for me, I'm very analytical, very left-brained, so I don't just see things and have a feeling and go with my feeling, whereas my friend Bob Meatbag, he's much more right-brained. He can just see something and sort of understand it. I need to, analyze it. So more experiments that aren't quite there, but, okay, making things more pointy. The ear is a bit too rounded, but things are pointy on this one anyway. So I see in all of them little things that are showing me what direction I'm heading in. So for this one, I see, the face is getting a bit closer. In this, it's, pretty much the faces are much further along, but I wasn't applying it to the body yet. And that's because I didn't have a consistent design language. And this is an exercise as well. You draw a character in side view and then try and see what they would look like in front view and try and translate it across. Now this one, even compared to the ones I started out with, it's getting closer to what it needs to be. There's issues, like with the leg, this muscle doesn't attach like that. But it's like, there is progress. This is getting closer. So things tend to fluctuate where you'll figure something out, but then you might not apply that right away because you're not sure that was a thing. You may not even be sure, that you hit on a thing. You don't even know, like, oh, I solved this. You're heading in the right direction. And that's why it might be good to have feedback from someone to let you know, like, hey, you should do this more. But for me, it's not a bad thing to experiment anyway. So now I'm moving into Mischief, and I like it as a drawing program. And I actually did a review on Mischief a while back. I'm not sure exactly when. And my biggest concern with it, or criticism of it, was its price. I thought it was overpriced. But I've heard they've reduced the price, and they've also made updates. So I'm planning to try the program again and see how I like it now. But anyway, I'm going to talk about it as it was when I was using it. And it was nice for drawing. I liked it as a drawing program, but I hated it as a painting program. So here I'm trying some rudimentary painting. And it's not that it's impossible. It's just that I have a certain workflow with Photoshop. I use masks and layers and things in a very specific way, using overlay modes and color modes and things and multiply. And I just have a lot of tools at my disposal, which I don't with this program. So this program, it's not as bad as going to, say, MS Paint, because it does have layers, but it doesn't have layer modes. But you don't have a ton of brushes, and so it's a lot more difficult to paint with it. But I do really enjoy drawing with it, and because it's an infinite canvas program, you can draw and then move and draw some more and move. And you'll see I'm doing a lot of these type of things where it's a character in a front view with their arms out, and or their arms and their hands. And it's because I'm trying to get the proportion. I'm trying to figure out, okay, how big do I need to make the head in this one? So this is where I started. And you can see that I'm trying to figure out the muscle placement. So it's not that I'm trying to draw a really muscular person. It's more, I need to understand what's going on underneath the skin. And in this case, this arm and this body does not match to this face and this head. So here's my second attempt, and it's like, yeah, this is getting closer. This is starting to feel a bit more cohesive. It's one thing. So again, heading in the right direction. Now here, it's something about pushing the waist, making it super thin. What happens if I make the ribcage smaller and I really push the hips out? And you may see it like, oh, you're being very sexist. You're focusing on these attributes of women. I don't know. That's a judgment that, to me, I'm just focused on appealing shapes, and whatever that ends up being, that's where I'm heading. And there's probably a reason that I find certain shapes appealing. But I don't know. I don't feel like, oh, I'm being really demeaning to anybody. But let's say I was. Let's say I was like really, oh, I like objectifying women. Because I also do it to men, by the way. I have men with huge muscles, but I never get comments on that. But anyway, let's say I'm objectifying women. In my personal view, an artist is free to do whatever they want to do. This is why art is great. It's like, I'm not hurting anybody. This is just a self-expression. So if you don't like it, you don't have to look at it. But I don't think it's fair to censor anybody, to say you shouldn't be drawing this, you shouldn't be drawing that. You shouldn't like this. Like, who cares? If they like it, they like it, you know? So anyway, I started doing this mural thing in Mischief, and I have a lot of figures, and this is really ugly. I hated this face, so let me just go through some of them. It's losing resolution as I zoom in, but yeah, just some drawings, and this one's face just, I don't know. So I fixed it, turned it into this. I think it's working better, looks a lot nicer in my opinion. And yeah, so I think I'm finished with the drawing. Yep, and now I'm moving into color. So as I said, there aren't layer modes, there aren't multiply modes, but there are layers. So when I'm doing this drawing, I have to think about it in terms of how can I get the results I would get in Photoshop without all the fancy tools. And I actually think this is a very good exercise because it tests you. It lets you know, like, do I really know my stuff? Or am I just relying on, you know, I don't understand colors, and so I use color balance to fix my colors, to make them look good. I don't understand how to make something look shiny, but I understand how to use the color dodge brush, and it will make things look shiny. With this, no, you don't get that. So what I usually do is I start off with an off-white background, and this helps me determine what my color palette will be, and it's usually a neutral. So let's say I usually start with something like this, like just purple or just like a greenish. But in this, I wanted to create a rhythm of colors, sort of like you start in purple and then you go through the rainbow and end up at like blue. So it's not how rainbows work, but whatever. You go through a bunch of colors. So I started with that. And then on top of that, I built the colors. And now I only have 4 brushes at my disposal that I'm using. And it's really 2 brushes because I'm using 1 hard brush, 1 soft brush. So that's 2. And then I'm using 1 hard eraser and 1 soft eraser. But you could think of a hard brush and a soft brush, especially in Photoshop. You can adjust the hardness of any brush, not any brush, but most brushes, you can adjust it from hard to soft. So that's just 1 brush. And so I'll show you an example of those. So for this edge, right, I think I probably started with a hard brush to paint this, and then I used a soft eraser to get this soft edge. In this case, I did the opposite. I used a soft brush here and a hard eraser to get this hard edge. So I need a combination of hard edges and soft edges, and usually it's a hard edge on the outside of a form, or when a form has a cast shadow. Like in this case, it's a cast shadow, so it's more hard. But then when the form turns, it's more soft. And I'm also making use of the background to have, okay, so look at this guy. So I actually painted where the light would be, but then where the shadow would be, I didn't even touch it. I just let the background become the shadow. And this is also something you can do in painting. So here what I've done though is I'm using white, and what I'm going to do is sort of mask out the figures. So this white is on a layer above everything else, and then that way I can paint freely underneath the white, and the white is going to make it all look clean. So looking at this guy again, this is the same, see? This whole area, it hasn't been changed, but once I add the white, it now looks like a shadow, and it's like, wow, how'd you get those nice gradations and color changes and everything? It's like, well, because it started out in that, and then the white is what's going to clean it up. So you'll notice, like even this, like just look at how much cleaner that looks just because of the white background. So I may say things like, don't start a painting using white, but that doesn't mean it can't end with white. You can totally end on white, but I think it's nice to start with colors, because then you're judging colors much more accurately. And so still working on coloring this, and more colors. I like this umbrella and the way the light shines and stuff. That's kind of nice. And I like this person, I like the skin tones and the color of the outfit. And I liked how I got this shiny. So again, I don't know, I don't mean to be patting myself on the back too much, but I was happy with how I could get this, because you can get this in Photoshop, this look, but you have to use the dodge tool. And so instead it's like, okay, I need to make this look shiny, but I don't have those tools. So then you have to understand color temperature, and okay, as it warms, or as I get to the highlight, I'm going to actually shift the color as well and make it a bit cooler. And anyway, there's that. It's smaller changes. So you'll notice in the beginning there's very big changes, and later on there's small changes, but they just take time. And this is what rendering is all about. It's just, you know, you can do this. This is rendering, right? Getting the basic form, making something look three-dimensional. But then I could zoom in and then render even more, render the smaller forms and the smaller forms and the smaller forms. And as you do this, as you start big and then render smaller and smaller and smaller, things look more and more detailed. But it's using the same technique. It's the same principles used over and over again. It just takes more time. And because you're working on smaller areas, it's harder to see the big change. So on this one, for instance, I tried a different rendering, made it, okay, more three-dimensional, I guess. I don't think it's working, but again, it's an experiment. It's, how do I know it's going to work unless I try it? So, yeah, just more little details, and I added this red thing because, I don't know, I thought it looked strange just having a naked person, you know, give her some weird armor, but I'm not saying it looks good. It's something, but it's not great. But anyway, so I also like this guy because he looks very bored. Anyway. So, okay, in the next episode, I'm going to be fumbling in the dark, and I'm going to explain to you in that episode what I mean by fumbling in the dark. So, I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.